Call to order the regular meeting of the Anchorage Assembly for the Municipality of Anchorage for June 18th, 2013. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Assemblymember Trainee. Here. Assemblymember Trainee is participating telephonically. Assemblymember Honeman.
Here.
Assemblymember Gray-Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Assemblymember Hall.
Here.
Assemblymember Johnston. Here. Assemblymember Starr.
Here.
Assemblymember Trombley.
Here.
Assemblymember Flynn. Present. Assemblymember Birch.
Here.
Assemblymember Steele.
Here.
Assemblymember Dembowski. Present. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Starr, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. We have no minutes from the previous meeting. Mr. Vacalis, any report from the administration? I understand the mayor is not with us, but
That's correct, sir, and no report. Thank you.
thank you. Only report from the Assembly Chair is let's thoroughly enjoy this incredibly warm summer. I have it on a fairly good source. It's going to be like this through about October 15th, and then we'll move back into winter. We'll go through for committee reports, beginning with Mr. Birch.
No report.
Ms. Dembowski.
No report.
Mr. Steele.
No report.
Mr. Starr.
Well, only that we have a meeting scheduled for the Budget and Finance Committee meeting this Thursday on the 20th, and we're still pending just a little information from the administration, so there may be a last-minute reschedule to the following week, but I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The MS Policy Committee will meet next Thursday at 1 p.m. in the Mayor's Conference Room.
Thank you. Mr. Trombley.
Ethics and Elections Committee will have a meeting on June 24th from 11:30 to 12:30 to discuss some challenges that are going on with Anchorage School District teachers. Right now, if you receive a gift over $50, you have to declare that. And what's going on is that the Ethics Commission is actually is overworked because we have good teachers. People are giving them gifts. One was a gift of roughly $2,000 in value for a particular class, I think, that somebody wanted to send them to. And so we want to work with the Ethics Committee, and Keith, the chair of the Ethics Commission, will be there to discuss some sort of remedy for this, whether it's raising the amount or making exceptions, reworking the language so that it doesn't become taxing for the commission. So we'll be dealing with that. And the members of the body are Mr. Starr, Mr. Trainee, Mr. Honeman, myself, and those are the members of the committee that asked that everybody be there on the 24th at 11:30, room 240, City Hall.
Thank you. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have kind of an extensive audit committee report. But anyway, the independent audit contract requires that the auditors meet with the Municipal Audit Committee after the audit's done to discuss the audit before it gets submitted to the Assembly, and it is on the agenda this evening. Therefore, on June 13th, the Audit Committee met with Macondo Cottrell staff, and they provided the required report to the Audit Committee. And just some points of interest that I wanted to bring out is there was one audit adjustment to do a wastewater utility fund dealing with intangible plant and depreciation. There was an uncorrected misstatement that the auditors considered that was immaterial. There were no disagreements with management. There were no significant issues or difficulties. There was one significant deficiency and one material weakness. There was an issue with terminated employees maintaining network access, and this has been an issue for the last several years as far as I can remember, and it's something that we really need to work on. When an employee turns in those keys, they need to be cut out of the system at the same time. And you can refer to the management letter for additional comments and suggestions that came to the attention of the auditors while they were auditing the city's financial statements. Now, in terms of the financial, the federal and state single audits, There were 15 additional grants for audit year 2012 in comparison to audit year 2011. There was a qualified opinion, which means there was a material weakness on compliance regarding child care and development grant. But remember that the program is no longer administered by the municipality. All other programs had unqualified opinions. There were 2 federal findings and no state findings. The federal findings had to do with income determination, records retention, and timely action on applications to do with the child care grant program. And the second one was special tests and provisions, records retention to do with the child care licensing program, and there was a significant deficiency there. And one thing that I wanted to bring to the attention of the body is that because of the extra grants and a few other things, the audit costs for 2012 increased by $50,000, but in the meeting, the auditor said that they intend to work with assembly staff on an agreement to figure out how much the actual billing for this additional work is going to be. So it may not be $50,000, and not putting any words in the auditor's mouth, but that's what I heard at the meeting. And I just want to take a moment to thank the auditors and municipal staff for doing a really, really great job, and Macunda Control in particular for being our auditors for the last 5 years, and they may continue to be our auditors, but there is an RFP that is being drafted by our staff to put the independent audit out to bid. It's a really big deal, and it's prudent that we put it out for bid every 5 years, if not sooner. And also in the audit committee, I just wanted to remind the audit committee and the assembly and the administration for that matter is that the audit committee is responsible for reviewing and endorsing the internal auditor's audit plan before it gets submitted to the assembly and the mayor. And in addition to that, if there are any changes, if anybody wants to bring up a new audit or change the audit plan in any way, the audit committee also has to review and comment on that proposed change before it just gets put out there. And I wanted to remind people of that. And also that the audit committee is the only committee, assembly committee, that is required by code. So what I'm talking about is law. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson, for the lot of the in-depth work here, keeping track of the audits and such as well. Mr. Chairman, we have the Public Safety Commission, the Assembly Public Safety Committee meeting was normally the second Wednesdays, but due to conflict room is scheduled for tomorrow at noon. We should be in the Assembly, the library conference room down here on the first floor, but if it's a large enough crowd, we'll come into chambers. Noon tomorrow. Remind the body that for those that are interested, attend, reference the office cocktail lounge. The application for transfer, if you remember, is coming before this body again, and that matter's been reviewed for our committee. As well, I do appreciate the knowledge on the insight on the good weather, but can you do something about the mosquitoes? I've got a huge...
Working on it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Starr, my apologies. You were cued in.
Only to Ms. Gray-Jackson. When you made your comments about modifying the audit plan, we had a request from the Chugiak Board of Supervisors for the fire department audit. Were you able to accommodate that?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, first off, I wasn't asked to, because from what I heard, that there was a conversation held with Ms. Mahoney who said, don't worry, she'll take care of it. But as you probably know by now, and if you hadn't already, that's not how it works. So if you would like to add an audit to the audit plan, we could have a really quick audit committee meeting. The committee could review it, and then we can move on from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I had asked her I wasn't sure of the scope of the need for it, so rather than modify it, I asked her as a member just to run that by you guys, and I didn't know if she had said that she's been out of town. So if it's necessary, and that, of course, came from Ms. Osiander, who is on the Board of Soups out there. But, if it needs to be formally petitioned, I'll make a case for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnston.
No report, except I want to convey my apologies. I might have to put my dark glasses on to see faces, and it's not that I'm trying to hide behind the dark glasses. It's sunny out there, and I forgot my regular glasses.
All right, we'll give that consideration. Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Chairman, I've got no comments. I just have a question, though, for George Michaelis. I missed the mayor's comments. I understand George. George, do you have any answer for me on the question of H2 Oasis as it relates to O'Malley? Remember, I think 2 weeks ago I talked to you about a problem H2 Oasis has. The state wants to redo O'Malley Road so they can't make a left turn coming off the hillside for the pumper trucks to pick up water at H2 Oasis.
Yes, sir.
Response from the administration on that question.
Yes, sir. I've got some response internally. The next thing is I have to meet with the DOT regional director and see exactly how wedded they are to make that happen that way. So that's my next course of action.
I appreciate it, sir. Because for us, we're dealing with the fire issue. As hot as it is, we've got to have in case they've got to take that water and run it up the hillside. So I know the state DOT has concerns, but I think our fire concern overrides them any day of the week. Thank you, George.
You bet.
Thank you, Mr. Training. We're now to the addendum to the agenda, and I will read that into the record, but I would ask for a motion to incorporate.
Move to incorporate.
Any objection to the incorporation of the addendum? Mr. Training?
No objection.
Seeing, hearing none, I will read it into the agenda. We have 9B7, AR 160, and that's the North America Outdoor Institute development and delivery of a statewide instructor training course in snowmobile safety. We have 9C3, AM 363, that's the 41st Avenue water upgrade. We have 9C4, AM 364, Anchorage Police Department's evidence storage lot. We have 9C5, AM 365, and that's for the Van Buren Street 48th Avenue Circulation and Access Improvements Phase 2. 9C6, AM 370, and that's a recommendation of award for security guard services at various municipal facilities. 9C7, AM 371, that's the 35th Avenue and McRae Road improvements, Wisconsin Street to Spenard Road. We have 9D13, AM 366, and that's the ML&P Customer Information System Customer Billing Support. 9D14, AM number 376, and that's for the Energy Management System upgrades. 9D15, AM 368, the Riviera Terrace Storm Drain Replacement Project. 9E7, AIM 65, that's the 2012 Schedule of Expenditures for Federal Awards, State Financial Assistance Report, and Required Federal Information. 9E8, AIM 66, the 2012 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the CAFR. And we have 9F6, AR number 159, capital improvements at the Anchorage Golf Course, and that's scheduled for public hearing on July 9th, 2013, that's accompanied by AM number 396. And that concludes the addendum to the agenda. So I would have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Prior to moving further with that, I have some disclosure issues. Before we get started here on the consent agenda, we have two items of conflict disclosures that I know of this evening. Ms. Dembowski, I see we have $142 of final interest going to the Anchorage Fire Department in item 9B6. The original grant was approved in 1999. You have no financial or private interest in the grant. As with similar items, we acknowledge your material relationship with the firefighter and entrust you to act in the public interest. Do you concur?
Yes, thank you.
Does the assembly occur? Seeing no objection, Ms. Dembowski, please participate. We do not need to pull this item. Mr. Trombley, I am handing you the gavel so that I can now make a disclosure on item 9D9 and ask the body to excuse me from voting. Item 9D9 under AM 356-2013 under new business is a grant to the Fur Rendezvous Festival. I am a member of the Greater Anchorage, Inc., the umbrella nonprofit organization of the Fur Rendezvous Festival. I have no personal financial interest in this item. In a policy capacity, my volunteer board service puts me with the grant recipient on this item. To avoid the conflict of basically sitting on both sides of the table, I ask to be excused from voting on this item.
I understand and recognize the conflict of serving on both sides of this item. Are there any questions from the body? Seeing none, Mr. Hall, this item will be pulled from the consent agenda, and you are excused from participation on this item.
Thank you. Do we have any other disclosures to address this evening? Seeing, hearing none, then I would ask for any items to be pulled this evening, beginning with you, Mr. Birch.
No items.
Ms. Dembowski.
No items.
Mr. Steele.
No items.
Mr. Starr.
9 Bravo 2 and 9 Bravo 7.
Mr. Flynn. Mr. Trombley.
No items.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull item 9 Delta 7, 9 Delta 8, 9 Elephant 1, and I'd like to pull 9 F2 for the purpose of adding my name. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman.
No items.
Ms. Johnston.
9A1.
I'll get it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I did forget to pull one. I'd like to pull 9 Alpha 2.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Any other? Mr. Trainee.
9C4. I have a question on that one. Should be a big one.
Okay. I am showing that we have pulled items A1, A2, B2, B4, B7, D7, D8, D9, E1, and F2. Did I miss any items? C4?
I think Mr. Trainee said Charlie 4.
So I pulled 9C4.
Yeah. So Bravo 4 is not pulled, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe.
Bravo 4 is not pulled. Okay. Very well. Anything else? Please vote on the consent agenda list the items that are pulled for action. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item A1.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, that item is approved. Ms. Johnston?
This is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring Molly S. McCoy for her 16 years of service to the municipality of Anchorage. Whereas Molly S. McCoy began working for the municipality on April 30th, 1997 as a video producer for the Lusac Library. It was promoted to fire training specialist January 1st, 2001. And whereas Ms. McCoy has worked for mayors Rick Meistrom, George Wirth, Mark Begish, acting mayor Matt Clayman, and current mayor Dan Sullivan. And whereas Molly has served under fire chiefs John Fullenwider, Craig Goodrich, Mark Hall, and Chris Bashu. And whereas throughout her municipal career, Molly has produced videos for the Anchorage Fire Department, Anchorage Police Department, Port of Anchorage, Municipal Light and Power, Anchorage Waste and Wastewater Utility, Department of Health and Human Services, Solid Waste Services, the Equal Rights Commission, Public Transportation, Municipal Manager, Park and Recreations, the Planning Commission, the Federal Emergency Management, the Library, and the Emergency Operations Center. And whereas Molly has produced the Firewise series, which include Firewise Lessons Learned, Firewise Staying Prepared, Firewise Landscaping, more than 95 episodes of Thursdays with the Mayor, AFD Magazine, the Chief Roundtable, and Excellence Through Training, and whereas through our research, the municipality has acquired free public access program from around the nation and the world for cablecast on Municipal Channel 10, and whereas Molly has received numerous recognitions award, which include the Anchorage Fire Department Special Employee Recognition Award in 2004, 11 Telly Awards, 2 CINI Golden Eagles Award, the Alaska Press Women's Award, the Mayor's Award for Public Service under Mayor Mystrom, the Governor's Safety Media Award under Governor Knowles, a nomination to the National Academy of Television's Arts and Sciences, the Anchorage Fire Department's Employee of the Year Award for 2008, and the Municipality Anchorage Employee of the Year Award for 2008. Whereas Molly retired from municipal employment on April 30th, 2013, now therefore be it resolved, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes and honors Molly S. McCoy for her 16 years of service to the municipality of Anchorage and the citizens of Anchorage, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 18th day of June, 2013.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, before I forget, I've got to start this out, maybe embarrass George Michaelis, who I was hired by back in 95, and in 96 I reported to him, I said, there's this television channel called Channel 74 in the Lusac Library building. Hey, why don't you come on over and check this out? We can do some great things over there. And he said, really? So I give you credit, George. You took the time. You went from City Hall, and I gave him the tour of some very old and broken down linear equipment up in the 4th floor of this building. And from there, you know, it was the Miller's Reach, believe it or not, the Miller's Reach Fire and the Fast Track Mitigation Funds that we competed for to educate the public that, you know, something like that can happen again here in Anchorage and the Greater Valley. So that was the first video that was produced called Northland Wildfires Lessons Learned. And from then on in, I never dreamt I'd still be here 15 years later. So it was a lot of production. It's a huge team effort. And I have to thank George for taking a chance and listening to my, you know, my great idea. Be careful with what you want. You might get it, because it will almost kill you at times. And I'd like to thank John Crabb, who took applied for my job and has been awarded my job. You're in great hands. And all the contractors that have really gone the distance. I still don't know how we did half those videos and the deadlines we did. But anyway, so thank you very much for this recognition.
Very good. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Molly, you're so used to being in the background, just making sure that our assembly meetings run well and folks at home can see them. And now you're on the stage, and you deserve to be on the stage. And I just want to thank you for doing such a fabulous job for all these years and making things run right. And I want you to know you're going to be missed, but I know you're going to stay in touch. So
I'll be here.
Good luck to you. Thank you, Molly. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you very
Chairman.
much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Honeman.
Molly, I just want to thank you for all your years of service to the municipality and, of course, our community and our citizens. I can't think of any more important thing to basically tell the story of what we do in municipal government. It's the people's taxes that, of course, are investing into the products, the services, the programs that are being run by the municipal government. And, you know, you are there to put that, I guess, the face to the program and to the little explanation so they can have information and education. That's really crucial, and particularly in this area where people are always looking for info. So Guns and Hoses is always a favorite for mine. I know you guys involved with that. And doggone it, the police ought to have won a little more often. Anyway, good teams, good times, and wish you best in retirement, but I hope you can come back from time to time, and I understand you're really looking forward to doing that. So.
Yeah, no, I am looking forward to that. And you do, I'll do one more pitch for Channel 10. It may not be CNN, but you have a great avenue out there, and it's a channel that is by law given to municipal governments and any kind of, you know, it's your community access. This is your opportunity to take advantage of that, and you can reach a lot of people. So thank you very much for this recognition.
Ms. Johnston.
I just wanted to say that you've done a wonderful job, and one of the things that always shocks me is how many people watch Channel 10. And I think it's been because of your production, because I don't think it's because of us. So
Well-
thank you.
Well, we just hope we get some information out there. I mean, it's a great avenue, and there's at least 100,000 people that tap into that, go by that. So particularly now with the weather, as gorgeous as it is, but it is red flag, that, they need to be aware of their environment. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Molly. We now have before us item A2.
Move.
Second.
Can I go ahead?
Yes. Ms. Stembowski, any objection? Seeing, hearing none, that item is approved.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and celebrating June 29th, 2013 as Polynesian Flag Day. Whereas on June 29th, 2013, the Polynesian Association of Alaska will celebrate its 8th annual Polynesian Flag Day by sponsoring an event to share the culture and history of the Polynesian Americans with the community of Anchorage and the state of Alaska. And whereas Polynesian Flag Day is the biggest holiday in American Samoa and has been established as an annual event honoring its political relationship with the United States in commemorating the raising of the American flag on Tutula Island on April 17, 1900. And whereas the celebration of Polynesian Flag Day is also a time to commend the service of Polynesian Americans who have fought and those who continue to fight for freedom in the service to the United States. And whereas the Polynesian Flag Day is an opportunity to involve the Anchorage community in the Polynesian Association of Alaska's mission to strengthen individuals and improve families of the Polynesian community through cultural pride and education leading to successful employment. And whereas annually for the past 7 years, board members and officers of the Polynesian Association of Alaska have enjoyed the support of the community of Polynesian families to make this cultural event of sharing Polynesian dance, music, food, art, games, and education available to our Anchorage community free of charge. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes Saturday, June 29th, 2013, as Polynesian Flag Day and encourages the community of Anchorage to support the 8th annual Polynesian Flag Day event by joining the Polynesian community in its cultural celebration on the Anchorage Downtown Park Strip between L and P Streets from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 18th day of June, 2013.
I'd just like to thank the Assembly for your support and for your aloha spirit. And would like to invite you to come next week, Saturday. And anyone here, please do come, and we'll have lots of food, fun, and family community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We now have before us item 9B2, AR number 151, the Anchorage Elks Lodge 2868. Mr. Flynn?
It's Mr. Starr who pulled
Yeah,
that.
move to approve.
But I'll second.
I just pulled this out of a note of caution. I'm going to support it tonight, but I wanted to put on the record that the conditional use matches up to this, and I think we want to make sure that we put some caution to that. So I guess through the chair, Amanda, can you suggest that the verbiage include that on the conditional use, the 1 year limitation where that comes back to us either in a sunset form or a repetition? So it wouldn't be appropriate on this club license, but I think the conditional use that matches up to that certainly would.
Sorry. I apologize about that. The clerk's office will work with the planning department to get that language in there.
Have they actually petitioned for conditional use yet? Your email indicated that they had not, but is there latent breaking?
As of now, they haven't applied for their conditional use permit yet.
So as to try to get it on the agenda for the July 9th, that's maybe going to happen or maybe not?
The conditional use process typically takes about 45 to 60 days. So once they make application, it'll still be a few meetings before it appears before the body.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, appreciate Mr. Starr pulling this one. This one kind of raised my eyebrows too because of the similar situation we were dealing with a couple weeks ago. There's also another one on here. I didn't pull it because it's a protest motion, and we're just going to wait for the conditional use permit. But under 9 Bravo 4, we're somehow locating yet another license at the same location that already has a license. So we've got some interesting issues ahead of us here. We'll coordinate with the clerk's office to get the data out, and I do appreciate, Amanda, your email earlier this week on these. And unfortunately, these are the challenging things we get to do as opposed to the fun things we get to do. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. We now have so we need to vote on that. Please vote. Can you reset? Please vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Everybody needs to vote again.
Still waiting on Johnston, Flynn.
Did you get everybody?
Yes.
Okay. That motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9B7, AR 160, North America Outdoor Institute's development and delivery of a statewide instructor training course in snowmobile safety.
Move to approve.
Second.
The reason I pulled this was I was hoping that we could get a consensus on the body that this is an important entity, and I wasn't trying to sponsor it solely with Mr. Trombley and myself. And the idea is that unanimous support would allow that as a community-wide inference that this is necessary. There's statistics, of course, that speak in the resolution on just the number of accidents. My son broke his back, as you may know, sometime 2 years ago. Mr. Trombley's got relatives that are in the sport, and the machines and the technology are just getting so impressive that I think that there's a need to do that. This isn't a regulatory thing. This is similar to, say, an avalanche awareness program or something like that. So if it would be acceptable to send the message that we have unanimous support, that's the reason I pulled it. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to add my name as a co-sponsor of this one. This hits kind of close to home for me. I've got a person who works for me who takes parts of the winter off to run heli ski trips. And last year, his company lost a couple of people in an avalanche. I personally have utilized the probe that found an avalanche victim that fortunately we were able to get out before he perished, and so he did survive, but it was a pretty emotional experience for me. And then, of course, in my previous career, I was proud to work with men and women who pioneered some of the most advanced avalanche technology as it relates to railroading in the country. So this is an important issue. We have a lot of people who spend time in the outdoors, backcountry, who perhaps don't have the information they need to remain safe, and so to the extent we can help them, I'm very supportive. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Horniman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Starr, should we all make an individual motion to be added, or do you want us to?
I can just direct the clerk to do it. It's, in sort of a message of unity was what I was trying to send, and I didn't take the liberty of doing that prior to this because I wasn't sure if people had feelings about it.
I have no objection. I'd love to be listed as sponsor.
Maybe just ask for objections, Mr. Chairman.
Let me, I was going to ask that anybody have any objection to their name being added to this? Mr. Trainee?
No objection.
Okay.
Added to begin with.
Very good. Ms. Johnston?
I just wanted to thank you for bringing this up. As a past avalanche instructor in the Reach Teach program, I think it's very important, particularly as snow machines are getting more and more powerful, and there's the high marking aspect. I think this cannot start early enough in schools.
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm probably the only one sitting here that's never been on a snowmobile in the 31 years I've lived in this town and don't plan to be on one. But I recognize that it's a really big sport in this community. And Mr. Starr, I want to thank you for bringing this resolution forward. It's really, really important. I support it wholeheartedly and glad to have my name on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Dembowski.
I also just want to say I think this is a great resolution, and I just want to point out I think in Alaska we snow machine.
Very good. Please vote. If there's a no vote, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9C4, AM 364, and this is the Anchorage Police Department's evidence storage lot.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Trainee?
Chief there, got a question for you.
Chief?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Trainee.
Mr. Trainee?
Chief, got a quick question for you. The storage lot, is it going to have every modern device installed in it so we don't have to worry about thefts? Because I know other parts of this country, they've had a problem with thefts out of the police lockup yard. So I want to make sure that the video cameras, all the surveillance equipment for this price have already been put into it. That nothing can be shut off by somebody making a mistake and throwing a switch to shut it off. And we don't have the coverage we need.
We were considering machine gun turrets, Mr. Trainee, but I think we're going to stop just short of that. It'll be fenced. It'll be on our property where we can keep an eye on it. It'll have video cameras. I think we're working hard at that because the existing facility across the way does not have those, and it gets us into trouble.
I couldn't hear you, but I assume they've taken care of it then.
I think so.
Yes. Anything else, Mr. Trainee?
Nothing, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Please vote.
Yes.
Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 9D7, AM 354, 2013 grant to Anchorage Economic Development Corporation.
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. By no means am I about to suggest that AEDC not get this money, but I missed the work session that talked about solid waste services and that they weren't doing so good, and there was even talk about selling it. And so I'm wondering, can solid waste services really afford to donate $50,000 to anybody? And I'm asking the administration that question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We have now before us 9D8, AM 355, 2013 grant to Campfire USA Alaska Council. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Move to accept. Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really a quick question. We're almost in July, and not only this grant, but I'm just wondering why are these organizations so late in receiving these grants to the administration? And I'm just curious, and I'm sure it has something to do with SAP. I mean, SAP. But I'm asking the question and not putting words into your mouth. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The answer is it's a multitude of things. One, of course, is late receipt of the grant requests. The second is that one of the things that we try to do is hold off as long as we can until we get as many as we can so we can do a fair evaluation of all of them. And so if we get late receipts, then that just kind of holds everybody else back. And then we did have a shortage of personnel for a short period of time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Mr. Trombley. That motion carries unanimously. Mr. Trombley, you're going to handle the next item, 99.
9 Delta 9.
Second.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll let Mr. Trombley take this up on the conflict matter.
My assumption is that it was already taken up. So are there any questions, comments? Seeing here none, go ahead and vote. Yeah, Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That passes 10-1 with one recused.
We now have before us item 9E1, AIM number 59, Executive Appointments and Compensation.
Move to accept.
Second.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the administration for providing this code-required information. But if you all remember, on May 21st, we approved an ordinance that changed the amount of information that's supposed to be reported. And this AIM does not include the required information, and it's from AO 2013-67. And so with that said, Mr. Chairman, I am going to move to postpone accepting this until the next meeting, which will give the administration time to pull the numbers together.
Second.
In accordance with the ordinance that was approved by the Assembly unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any objection to postponing to the next meeting? Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No objection. I'm a little confused by the memorandum. If you look at line 23, it says additional compensation, and it appears to have what I think are the actual salaries of the people below, as opposed to additional compensation, I hope. So if we get that clarified before this comes back to us, that'd be nice.
Okay, Mr. Flynn, we shall do that. Okay, we now have before us, Mr. Trainee, did you vote yes on that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Pardon? Yeah, there was no objection to postponing. We have now before us item 9F2, AO number 77, amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 7 to clarify and provide for Assembly approval of certain contracts.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My purpose in pulling this was just to add my name, and so I think it's just been added. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our consent agenda. Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'd like to waive our normal rules and invite our appearance request folks to speak if they are here at this time.
Any objection from the body? Seeing, hearing none, we will waive that, and we will, give me just a moment to flip to the correct page. Are all the presenters here? Are any of the presenters here now?
Jim Burnett's not.
Maybe you should ask Mr. Chairman for if Ms. Teresa McDonald is available.
Yes. Is Ms. Teresa McDonald here? I do not see her. Mr. Barnett. Okay. Would you like to come up and do your presentation, or do you want to wait for Mr. Barnett?
We should wait for him. I know he's showing up, so we should wait for him.
Okay. Mr. Flynn, if you're okay, I know Mr. Barnett wanted to be a part of this.
Oh, wait, no problem.
Okay, we'll wait. And what we'll do is go ahead and take our dinner break, and then we'll come back and wrap up. Thank you. Call the meeting back to order. Give Assembly members a chance to take their seats. We are at Assembly appearance requests. Is Teresa McDonald here? Yes, please join us. Good evening.
Good evening.
The floor is yours.
Okay. My name is Teresa McDonald. I am born and raised here in Anchorage. I've also lived in Washington for 7 years. you know why I'm here. I'm here to try to get a good pathway of understanding between the individuals who have been, through the years, running remote control boats that are gas powered or are either electric. They also, I guess there was rules that were made back when C Street was developed, and they, I guess, had hit a natural spring and a crane fell in, and there was some issues with Taku Lake. So I guess that there was some laws that were set in place for them. But as you know now, things have changed since then. And there's a nice neighborhood back there. The road is called Queen Victoria. There are people who live there in that neighborhood that don't want to hear the loud noises coming from these remote control boats. By the way, do you have a copy of this?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And the issue is there's no understanding between the people who want to enjoy the environment around Taku, the people who want to go there to see the graves, the beavers, and the loons. It's very difficult to talk to the people and try to realize that there's wildlife here in this lake, and they don't see it. So when they take a remote control and operate it and stand on a plaque that was made for a person who drowned in that lake on behalf of so-and-so, it's like a cemetery grave, like a stone head. He stands on that and is very proud of his boats going around for hours. It could be for 6 hours. And with the vibration of the boats on that lake are harassing these animals that come to this lake. And it also is very irritating when you walk around, you have a long day of going to work, and you want to go to Taku to try to relax. You're not able to do that at Taku with the remote control boats. So I would like to try to, with your understanding in Parks and Recs, try to petition to see if we could get this changed or have them go there a certain time frame and only utilize the lake for a certain amount of time.
Okay. Mr. Trainee, you're in the queue.
I'm here.
Yes.
I couldn't hear most of what she was saying. We got to fix that microphone. It doesn't come too well across the phone. Is John Rada there by any chance?
Yes, Mr. Rada is in attendance.
We'll look into this problem.
Mr. Rada, Mr. Trainee would like you. What I can tell you, Ms. McDonald, Mr. Trainee, who's been working this issue for you with Mr. Rada, is on the phone tonight. If Rada is now at the microphone. Mr. Trainee?
John, have you looked into that? It was 2 weeks ago we talked about it. You said you'd look into it. I wonder what's been done. I was talking to Becky Roberts, who said it's been quieter. So I don't know if something was done or not, or just they've stopped running them.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what he said.
He said he's under the impression that it hasn't been as noisy lately. Have they not been operating the boats there?
They haven't been there due to some circumstances that appeared to happen in the parking lot.
Okay.
Would you like to hear about what happened to their boats and what happened to their tires? One of the persons who goes to the lake and is forming these powered boats groups apparently drove up to the parking lot and all four of his tires were slashed. And I guess a drunk driver had pulled into Taku and hit the van, so knocked out some remote control boats. So they haven't been there, but needless to state that regardless of what happened, and if they're not there, they will probably more than likely go there when winter comes, because when winter comes, everyone's going to go into their homes and partake in some other activity, whatever they do with their kids. So these people will soon migrate to the lake and perform the remote control boats.
Okay. Mr. Rada, any comment?
Through the chair, Mr. Trainee, you and I have discussed this. Jennifer Johnston also sent me an email earlier today. Ms. McDonald and I have not met, but two things. First, the area is signed at both accesses to Taku that no unauthorized motorized vehicles are allowed. Okay. Taku is not a designated area for the use. It is prescribed in code in several areas regarding the information. Jennifer, if you want to speak to this, I think I gave you some reference. APD is aware of it. We've put them on notice, and that's the way we've left it at this point. We do not have enforcement powers in Parks and Recreation, only Health and Human Services and APD. So whether it's a noise issue or a use issue or a combination, that enforcement with the citizen complaint can go to APD or Health and Human Services, and they can dispatch somebody to the site and deal with it accordingly. We have heard there's a desire to use the lake, even if it was on a permitted basis. We're prepared to move forward in that sense, but we're not going to permit anything until it's resolved as to what the hours should or shouldn't be by access based on public input. And that's the way we would leave it. But for now, it is not an authorized use. It's not a permitted use. It's not a designated use area. And by code, that makes it a violation if you use it, and it is citable.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Well, that was, thank you, Mr. Rada, and I was going to, I guess, address to the chief. I'm not sure if anyone's contacted the police department reference. I'm familiar with that part of the code. Has that been, is this being an issue? I mean, I realize prioritizing person crimes versus it's more of a nuisance and noise and such, but.
Mr. Hahnemann, through the chair, Mr. Rada brought this to my attention about a week ago. I've talked with the patrol and crime suppression division captains and told them that if we get complaints, we should enforce it. There'll be a learning curve, of course, because who ever heard of this, but once we get the troops used to doing it, we'll take care of the complaints when we get called in.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
I mean, there may be some false starts here because it'll take a while for them all to find the right ordinance and right site and realize that it's something we need to do.
Sure. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you. I have no one else in the queue, but Ms. McDonald, it would appear to me that this is going to be addressed for you. It is a violation of municipal code for them to be in there with the boats. So all you need to do is notify the police department, and they will respond to that.
Mr. Chairman, run back in there, sir.
Oh, Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. McDonald, after listening both to Parks and Rec Division Director as well as the Director of Police Service, the Chief, no need for us to make a law that's already on books. So I would suggest, it's in a public location, so there's really no right to privacy. So if you've got if you've got a group of residents that are concerned about the noise or the violation, not to be confrontational people, but if someone's listening to you, if you make that comment, you're not supposed to be out here, it's illegal. Oftentimes, even these little devices here, you can get it on video, or if you've got a video camera. That way, you've got a picture of who it is, and at least some sort of contact you're supposed to leave. It never hurts to get like license plates and things that you can give to the police for report purposes.
Understood. However, to prevent any type of confliction with these individuals, can there be some signs that could be put up before winter sets in?
Apparently, from what Mr. Rada said, it is posted at both access. It's going in there that there are no motorized operation on the lake.
Well,
So, and that's why I say, if you have that occur, basically what Mr. Honeman says, rather than doing a confrontation, take the photograph, call the police, and enforcement should be there. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Trombley?
Mr. Rod, maybe not this lake where it's allowed, but are there lakes where that sort of thing is allowed? And the reason I ask is because public parks are exactly that. They're public. They're there for everybody. And obviously there has to be some respect level there. This lake doesn't allow that. But everybody pays for it through their taxes. Are there lakes where in the municipality where that is allowed?
It is only allowed by special permit. It's not an open entry.
Okay, thanks.
So if, then maybe further, if there is an organization or an individual who wishes to use a specific lake, we would look at the lake's character, the environment, the surroundings, wildlife, waterfowl, neighbors, etc., and determine whether that's appropriate or not. And if it is, then we would issue a permit for a certain amount of times and dates, and that's the way we typically pursue it.
Okay, thank you for helping me understand the process.
Thank you, John.
I have another community member here with me, just showed up, or she said she heard everything. She stated that there are no signs posted. It's Martha?
I think Mr. Rada just showed you a photograph. They're not posted on the lake, they're posted at entry to...
Yeah, I was just there. I go twice a day, so I'm very familiar, and I look for signs. And unless they were posted...
We need your name.
Martha Henderson.
Okay.
And I was there twice today. I go every single day, twice a day. And these signs, it says authorized motor vehicles prohibited. However, the people that are using the remote control do not understand this sign as being applicable to them. So it's misleading at best.
Right. What we just shared with her that you missed is when you have that violation occur, you can call the police department, and they will come out and inform them that it is a motorized vehicle and it is prohibited.
I can appreciate what you're saying. However, it seems to be more proactive, is that sign isn't very clear. And in speaking on behalf of the people that are trying to use it for that purpose, they're traveling to get there. They're under the assumption that they have a permit to be there. So there's a lot of misinformation, and there's confrontations that are happening that are escalating. And my concern is, while we can take photocopies of their license plates and we can videotape things, the piece of that lake is really being put in jeopardy. Even if it seems a minimum time, people lose their patience and they lose it quickly, especially the people that are enjoying this activity. So it seems to me it'd be not a very expensive expense to have something that's a little bit clearer. That sign really isn't very clear. And
I'm sure Mr. Rada will look into that. Yes.
If I may, through the chair, we'll go further and we will prepare signs that will cite the code provisions that are specific and therefore should assist APD, because if you look in the code, it is very specific about the use or non-use, particularly to motorized vehicles, and so hopefully that will clear it up.
I hope so. The situation, it really it has continued to escalate, and I am really concerned about someone's safety there. And so I appreciate you listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you had addressed it adequately. Just encourage you guys to be patient, recognize that, of course, on the scale of police calls for service as well, that, if someone's got a car crash or someone's injured, or, probably going to be a higher priority. So you make a call, you think that the police are going to come, lights and sirens. I'm just using that for effect, not necessarily reality, but not necessarily will you get make a phone call and 10 seconds later another officer will stop in. But
well, no, we can appreciate that, but I think what we're trying to say is we have witnessed a very hostile, confrontational action.
So videotape, make note, several persons is better than one person.
I just don't want anyone to get hurt.
Understand.
And I'm telling you that the threat of injury there is very high, and I just do not want anyone to get hurt. This is a kids' park. It was even donated and says it's a fishing hole for youth. And I'm just letting you know that as someone that goes at least twice a day, and witnessed this firsthand, the risk of something happening is great, and having a sign that is clearly delineates the use of the park, other than just listing the statutes. I understand statutes change. I think it would go a long way in providing some support for those people that want to say, hey, I don't think you're supposed to be here, and further for the people that are violating it to understand their rights and responsibilities.
Mr. Chairman?
I've got Ms. Gray Jackson ahead of you, Mr. Birch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, both of you, for being here. And John, thank you for that suggestion on changing the sign so that the code is right there on the sign. That's a wonderful suggestion. But how soon do you think that can happen?
Through the chair, Ms. Jackson, as fast as we can get the signs ordered, made, and put them up. It's a process, and there's lots of signs being made. We'll ask for an expedited process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I just have one last question. Is there any possibility if we could have Parks or Rec or the municipal workers speak in behalf of the ordinance or if they are coming to Taku?
I'd like to answer that question, if I may. Parks and Rec does not have enforcement powers. One of the things we try to do is also avoid conflict. We have spoken to some of these individuals. Our instructions are do not engage. If you feel it's being pushed back, you step away from the scene. Okay? We're not in the mode of trying to interject ourselves into something where we can't enforce what actually is provided by code. Our instructions are when they come back, they fill out an incident report, they bring it to my attention. In turn, that's how I met with the chief. So they're now aware of the situation. We'll do our part with better signage.
Mr. Birch.
I was concerned. I think it was reported here earlier that somebody had tires slashed. I mean, that's $1,000 worth of damage to a vehicle in a public park. Was that incident reported or otherwise investigated? Because it strikes me that.
Not to us.
Pardon me?
Not to us.
I would. That's not a shouldn't be something that's left without a response by APD or something. I mean, hopefully somebody reported that. That's horrific, and it is an item that will escalate. And I think that the best way to address that is see if you can determine who the culprit is that's doing that kind of vandalism. That's a significant step. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Our next request for public appearance is Jill Massal, Altamagadi, the Abbott Loop Community Council. No, I switched.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all again. I'm Jill Missel. This is Al Tamani.
Hello, I'm Al Tamani, Abbott Loop Council.
We are here to present to you a resolution that was brought through the Abbott Loop Community Council by the residents of Commodore Drive, and you do have a packet in front of you. It starts with the resolution looks like this. Just make sure everyone has one.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I optimistically hope to be able to show you a couple of visual aids, but I'll just talk through it. I'm going to describe the problem briefly by just reading from the municipality's project site, as the municipality extended Independence Drive in an attempt to reduce the traffic on Commodore Drive. Jamestown Commodore Drive has become a major cut-through route for people traveling to O'Malley Road and the Seward Highway. Neither Jamestown Drive nor Commodore Drive is designed to carry the traffic volumes they are experiencing, and complaints from adjacent property owners are increasing. Residential development to the east of Independence Drive along Valley Park Drive, Ridge Park Drive, and Ridgemont Drive has exacerbated the problem. So that's the municipality statement of very accurately what's going on in our neighborhood. Commodore Drive is classified as a local street, which is defined in the Muni Official Streets and Highways Plan as designed to provide access to abutting residential property. And as such, the street does have driveways coming directly into the street. We have to turn straight from Commodore Drive into our driveways. The Official Streets and Highways Plan right-of-way standards indicate that local streets should have a maximum average daily traffic count of 2,000 vehicles or less. Commodore Drive during the summer has an average daily traffic count of 4,300 vehicles per day. In the winter, it's more. We do have school traffic that makes our problem a little worse. And today I went out to try and figure out why we still had this traffic problem despite the new Independence extension, which was designed to reduce our traffic. And unfortunately, Commodore Drive does remain the fastest route through the area to and from Abbott. Independence Drive doesn't save you any time, unfortunately. So all the people that have been building up the habit to use it are going to continue to use it. So as a community council, we went through the process, and as a community, we chose what we wanted to do. We chose 3 options for putting up fire gates, which are barricades that can be opened by emergency services. We chose 3 locations that we thought would be good in making the route through the neighborhood more circuitous to really encourage people physically to use Independence Drive. So we're here to talk to you about that and hopefully get some implementation on our idea.
Madam Chair, members of the Assembly, it's a horrific situation that's occurred over there, and it really isn't anybody's fault at this time. It's just a situation as how can we help improve what's there now. Now, there were signs put up last year on Independence Drive directing people to take that route over to, O'Malley. And that reduced the traffic count to down about 3,000 cars a day. And so, but those signs were then taken down, and now the traffic has increased up to 4,000 a day. So I think that as a partial, solution to put those signs back up would be very, very helpful. As I understand, there is a joint project study going on between the state and the Muni Traffic Department to try and address a long-term solution, perhaps with other exits. So I just hope that, and in fact, Jill was just telling me that the Department of Transportation is going to close O'Malley, I guess, starting, tomorrow. And I am not aware of any public notices, nor did I receive any information from the Department of Transportation, but they should at least, and we're going to talk to them, at least have notice in the paper and to the councils that that's what they're going to do. So I guess our aspect is if there's anything that you can do to help us or the administration can do to help us, I think we would really appreciate that, and I know the people in that area would. If you have any questions, Jill can probably answer them more than I, so you can address them to her. Thank you very much.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, I think you've asked about the fire gates before, and how would you suggest that we do that before O'Malley Road gets fixed as far as the entrance into Independence Park, as far as blocking off Commodore Drive and Jamestown? Would that be?
In your packet, the last 3 pages are 3 maps that show the 3 options we approved through our process of potential places to put those fire gates that would still allow residents to come all the way through, would still allow emergency vehicles to come through the neighborhood without even using the fire gates, while still making that route a little more circuitous so that cut-through drivers that are going to Abbott or going to O'Malley will be discouraged to use it and encouraged to use the faster route of Independence.
Okay, now I do see this now. I was trying to figure out where the gates were. So they would, and have you spoke to the people as far as on Elcador Drive?
Yes, absolutely. We've spoken to the people on Jamestown, the people on Elcador. We've spoken to a developer that's putting in about 4 dozen new units right off of Jamestown. Everyone would be pretty happy with that. We discussed it as a community, as a neighborhood, kind of which options we could all live with, and we were all split. Everyone pretty much said, they might prefer one thing or another, but they could live with any of those options.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Starr?
Is there homeowners associations over in that homeowners subdivision?
In this specific area, no. There are some condo associations on Elcador. We do have a homeowners association from what I can figure out, but it hasn't been active since I bought my house.
And the city provides the snow clearing services?
Correct.
For the entire area?
Correct.
Those gates are challenging in the wintertime in terms of having to open them to clear the snow and then shut them back down. The guys have to get out of the rig, so it's some of those challenges. There's a traffic study in your packet that you gave us that was just a 1 day of data. Was there more than just 1 day, and how did that study originate?
Yes, sir. There are many, many data studies, actually, just in the interest of making your packet small. I just picked a day. They were all pretty much the same. I believe that the one I put in there was from 2009.
No, it was from 2012.
2012, I'm sorry.
And, what was the reason for doing that, or whose ear did you get to start that up? Because it's inspiring data, really. There's a lot of traffic.
There is quite a bit of traffic, yes, sir. We also did another study in 2009. The way that came about was just as a neighborhood, we're just at our wits' end. We've had cars totaled. We can't use our street for anything. We can barely clear our own driveways because of the traffic. So we kept asking for traffic studies, and we've gotten them done a time or two over the years, and that was, I think, the most recent one.
And when they get the traffic data, what do they say back to you in terms of the analysis?
Honestly, sir, they don't say much back to us. They just kind of give us the numbers, and we had to do the rest of the research. We've been really trying to work with the Muni since 2009 to come up with a solution. The Independence Extension was the named solution, and as Al pointed out, it really hasn't relieved our problem at all. So as a community, we came together and thought, what else could we do?
And this is through Community Planning Department that you're talking with?
Community Council.
No, inside the municipality workings, you're working with the planning department?
The traffic department, yes.
Okay. And is that under PM&E now? That's where you have that? Great. Thank you. Appreciate your presentation.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This area is Mr. Trainey and my and Mr. Birch and Ms. Johnson's district, and Mr. Trainey and I have been working with you through emails and community council meetings, and I've seen emails from Mr. Birch, and it's been a long, long time, and I've seen responses from Public Works, and I'd really, in this forum, since, everybody's talking about this publicly, finally, and I'd like to hear from the administration, also known as Ron, because you're the person who was responding to this issue before. If you don't mind, please, I'd like to hear your response to this situation and what could possibly be done to once and for all help. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you. Through the chair, Assemblyman Gray Jackson. My name is Ron Thompson, Public Works Director. I have been working with Jill for many years. We agree there is a problem. We don't disagree at all. We almost completely agree. That what we disagree on is the solution of where to get there. What we've talked about in many years, this is a problem that developed over poor development years and years ago, that they were supposed to put in an axis that was never required to finally be installed. So we're dealing with a problem that should have probably never happened, but we are where we are. We agree with the numbers that I believe we've done several studies. We try to do them. We did them before and after the construction of Independence. The problem with the Independence connection right now, it's only a right in, right out, so it doesn't solve all of the issues. Anybody that wants to use that route cannot turn left except onto O'Malley to go east unless they go to the Commodore direction. So after the study went, the construction went in, and it took 2 summers because we were working with the state of Alaska on rerouting traffic and all different things for the Huffman job, and so it took a little longer to get that project finished and completed. We finished it last summer. We did studies both, I believe, 2 weeks after, and also I believe there's another one that was about a month and a half after the construction went in. Immediately it showed that the traffic went down over 1,000 trips per day. We did have signs during construction heading them toward O'Malley on Independence. For some reason they initially went up in orange, so they were kind of like a construction type sign. They went down. We've agreed to put new signs up at the intersection. Those just have not come out of the production line yet, and they'll be putting up I would say any day now. I don't know. I'm actually surprised that they're not up. I haven't been over there to see, but they should have already been up. We'll get those up, and I'll check and confirm with traffic. We'll get those signs up to try to give people the idea to go straight, because she's right in the fact that people get in a habit, they go a certain way, they don't realize that road for at least 5 years was a dead end. So to get people to go there, they don't know that it's still not a dead end. So we continue to work on that. The other project that's going on, the state has received funding with regard to an O'Malley upgrade between Lake Otis and New Seward Highway. That project alone should, and in the design phase of it right now, and they're working through the public process, is they are going to put in, left out, so it will handle all the directional traffic movements on Independence. We hope, at this time, the stage is over the time that gets in and people can go in both directions, that should take and clear the traffic pattern and the numbers that are on Commodore and get it more in realm with what the code talks about with regard to traffic and average daily traffic numbers. With that, we've mentioned to both the Community Council and Jill to get highly involved with the DOT, because it's a DOT project that we think will help at least solve our problem. At the same time, they've mentioned a lot to do with the fire gates, and in our practice of road design, all of the safety factors, all of the access to these, all of our engineering tells us not to put in these traffic gates, especially in a snow environment. There's only a certain couple places that they truly work, and this is not one of them in any of the aspects that all of the experts that we've had look at it. It's not a solution. So we think that the process still needs to go through the DOT's design, work with them, and continue doing a public process and try to see if we can come up and then evaluate if we have anything else to do once that intersection is in place. But right now we knew it would be a partial fix. We've told everyone involved that the initial phase of Independence was only going to be a partial, that it was not going to solve the problem, but we're bound to the constraints of trying to fix a solution under the constraints that we have and with the funding that we have. And we believe that we're at least moving forward, and the funding has been approved, and the state has it, and they're going through that process. So we're I think Mr. Trainee also mentioned to deal with the H2O Oasis, and that is also in the whole process. They're discussing that, and we feel that all of those should handle in the public process with the O'Malley upgrade. So hopefully that helps you give you understanding of where we are today on that project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Honeman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thompson, briefly. And Ms. Bissell, thanks for bringing the information up and staying diligent as was advised with it. I'm glad to hear that you, I'm going to go out on a limb here. I thought I heard you say the left in, left out instead of right in, right out on Independence is being resolved or will be resolved at some point?
Well, right now it's right in, right out.
Right.
And it's going to contain both left in, left out, right in, right out. It's going to be full directional.
And my understanding, that is state, correct? That's DOT, and that's the things that.
Yes, and the state's agreed to doing that in this project. And it's been always a part of the project to know that we needed this.
Well, for the benefit, and I'm not trying to take a blind swing at the state because they're not here to defend themselves, but I guess I'm asking you on a serious note. It's been my experience, a frustration in many community councils, that the state DOT doesn't necessarily have the best public process. And so you're giving advice to this community council, and even this body has, I know I can speak for myself, I've had difficult at best opportunities to try to work with DOT to get the public's input across the DOT, much unlike what we have at the municipality and the Public Works Department. So what is your experience? Are you able to work with the state, the DOT, and are they able to listen to us and concerns? The best example you can use is the one you just highlighted. I understand there's thousands of people petitioning down near the H2 Oasis for that, maybe perhaps have a roundabout so that they don't do the left only, because even on the east end of town, I get it, the state wants to just get their plows and zoom straight ahead. They want to eliminate as much traffic getting in and off of the state roadways. But sometimes it's just not practical. So are you working?
Yeah, I mean, we work with the state on almost every project that goes on in town, because most people don't always realize this, but most of the state streets and the city streets are intertwined throughout the city in many, many places. So we work with them a lot. Are we successful in every case? No. We work together. I mean, it's always, in some cases, the codes apply, but there's different standards. The state has a little bit slightly different standards than we have. Some of it depends on if we're going to take ownership after the project, then they have to meet our requirements. The projects where the state maintains them after, there's certain guidelines that they meet, and we give our recommendations, and most of the time we're successful in getting our recommendations in, but not all the time, and they have different standards, and they're able to do that if they maintain ownership of their property. In this case, we're working with them pretty close, real close, because of the fact that we understand there's a problem in the neighborhood. So we're not in disagreement there. We know there's a problem. The issue is we feel that when we solve that intersection, and the main reason that we were trying to hold out and hopefully get a real intersection there with lights, but we can't because of the topography in the area. There's no way to set that up in that location without filling it up, to a level that doesn't make it feasible. So we're working there. On the H2 Oasis piece, we've done a traffic study. There's 80 traffic movements that are making left-hand turns into their coming west on O'Malley. So there's only 80 actions, and 80 actions to, at this point, the latest that I had heard is 80 actions typically is not a number that would warrant the cost with regard to the project, which would run about $1 million to make that access in and do it the way that they were talking about doing. So I think that that's still in negotiation. I don't think any final decision has been made. Typically we review every project that the state hands out. So I don't know completely their public process, but I do know that they call for meetings. We go and attend their public meetings. We've attended many public community council meetings with regard to projects in certain areas. So, I can't really say that they don't have one or it's different than ours. Most of the things that they do seem to be very similar to our public process. What happens is sometimes when people don't get the answer that they want, they feel that public process has not been correct. And that's the issue sometimes. And other times I think that, we just try to communicate as well as we can and try to get the real issues on the table. And then, of course, in any project that we deal, there's always the cost to benefit ratio and the risk to liability ratio and all of those things that go into play. And you try to weigh that and get the best product and the best process. And most of those decisions are tried to be played out in the context-sensitive design process early and before the design phases. And so, that's the way we do it for sure. I believe most of the time we're part of that process in the state, and we've been, they're pretty good to deal with. We meet with the state on a weekly basis in all aspects of public works projects. So I would say that I still believe the neighborhood needs to completely keep their voice heard, stay in the process with the state. It's in the design phase. It's going to be in the design and public process stage for another year probably. And so they really need to step up and keep the involvement going on there.
Mr. Starr?
If you prevented northbound travel through the neighborhood through a one-way sign option, would that help so that folks couldn't cut the neighborhood? Like southbound travel coming out onto O'Malley seems to be that, but if you prevented traffic from being able to go back into the neighborhood that way, is a one-way street option something that you would entertain?
Where would the traffic, they'd be forced to go one direction, not the other? It would go against all traffic flow engineering requirements in that type of configuration for a residential street.
Well, not necessarily with Independence Drive. just several blocks away. If you cut the trips that they could potentially cut through, northbound travel seems to be what they're doing, and I would bet you the speeds are pretty high as well. So I would say if you prevented access coming off of O'Malley through a do not enter signage, but allowed traffic to exit in that last corridor, you may see some solution. The other question I have is how about stop signs to make it so painful? I know stop signs are painful for the residents that live on those streets as well, but are there stop signs now on every street corner or just Commodore and the other one?
There are stop signs on all the street corners.
And do they just blow them?
They do blow them every time APD comes out to do enforcement. They've been very good about coming out when we ask.
Yeah.
They just write tickets all day long for people rolling the stop sign and for speeding. We did get speed bumps in, I think, 2007. That's how long this has been going on. 2007, we got speed bumps that helped with the speed. As you can see from the traffic reports, didn't really help with the numbers. The other thing that we have to consider, though, considering your last question, if we make it a one-way road, we're cutting off the access for the residents who live there.
Well, if they came in on Independence, and then came back, then you'd go southbound only. And I guess only that. Those fire gates are problematic. They're not a popular solution. And
well, it's funny because you're asking about the very first solution that we put forward to the Muni, that Mr. Thompson put his foot down and said, absolutely not. We will not cut off that access at all. And after looking at it, it's probably true that would increase our emergency response more than putting these fire gates in, because then police and firefighters would have to come in all the way through Independence, and we'd be the very last.
Mm-hmm.
So, we
well,
don't necessarily...
I don't pretend to be a traffic engineer by any means, but we've seen it. And again, some of the connectivity policies that originated in our community design developments have not been overly popular, and the street connectivity press that the developers were told that they had to do opened up these neighborhoods to this kind of problem, and they're continuing to open up. And so how we change that from a global or administrative perspective, we need to. It doesn't help you in the interim, but the continuation that street connectivity will occur under all costs may not be the best for neighborhoods. Thank you for presenting.
Yeah, one more thing, if I may. This is a neighborhood that is not in any sort of hazard zone. It's a planned out neighborhood, very nice little residential neighborhood. It's very sustainable, and it's being absolutely ruined. I've had some of my neighbors just move away, and a lot of them say they really desperately want to get out because we just can't stand it anymore. This is absolutely ruining our neighborhood. We went through 4 or 5 years of public process now to come up with the solution that we, as a neighborhood and as a community council, want to go forward. We're not necessarily saying that this is the very best traffic solution that can ever be put forward. We're not even saying it will for sure work, but what we're saying is this is what we want to do with our neighborhood. So we're putting it in your hands after having been through this multi-year process and asking you to support what we've decided as a neighborhood.
Thank you. There are no other questions.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add on to what Ron has talked about, working with the Department of Transportation on the O'Malley Road. There's been 4 community councils have been meeting periodically for the last 3 weeks, and we've been working with our legislators. Senator Meyer's been working with the Office of the Governor, the Department of Transportation Commissioner, and a letter's been drafted, which is going to be sent to them to have a public meeting or a meeting with at least the councils and who else wants to come on that intersection. It was interesting during these overview of what they're doing, we talked to the fire department, had them come up and ask them questions. And H2 Oasis is a reservoir for the fire department. They've got the proper hookups and all that. In case there's a fire on the hillside, they got 350,000 gallons of water. And each of those tanker trucks carry about 3,000 to 4,000 gallons. So there's over 125 or 30 truckloads of water can be available in case there's a fire on the hillside. By closing off that entryway to H2 Oasis, those trucks cannot drive there. They'll have to go all the way down the hill to the old Seward Highway and then come back up. So what we are proposing to them is to put in a roundabout, and we provide them the traffic counts on Dowling Road. We provide the traffic counts on Huffman. We provide them the traffic counts on O'Malley Road. So that process is moving forward, and I'm certainly going to work, with Ron to get him involved, because it was appalling to me that the Department of Transportation had never talked to the fire department. So I just wanted to pass that on to you tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Our next presenter is the Centennial Advisory Committee, Mr. Barnett.
Thank you all. Good evening. My name is Jim Barnett. I'm a member of the Anchorage Centennial Advisory Committee, and I have with me, they've come closer. I think you know Susan Duck and Nina Kempel with the Alaska Humanities Forum. Nina's with the Humanities Forum, and Susan, of course, is with Mayor Sullivan's office. If you recall, I met Okay, I think I may have accidentally pushed the button, sorry. If you recall, I met with you all in April, and we discussed funding, and you were very gracious to provide $500,000 in funding for the project, and I think there was a lot of concern amongst you, and you asked that we come back and discuss with you on a regular basis our plans with the funds, and as I told you in April, we'd come back in June and then again in September, and we'll keep it up as long as you want to see us. Of course, Chairman Hall is a member of the Advisory Commission. You're all welcome to attend any old time you'd like, and we'll keep you regularly informed of the meetings. But I'd like to share with you this evening this packet, which I laid on your desk at the break. And I want to thank Susan and Nina for putting this together. The objective here is to show you what we've accomplished in 2 months and hopefully convince you that we're utilizing your funds appropriately. Fundamentally, our projects associated with the Centennial are intended to deal with the culture and history of our community and its associated communities, meaning within the municipality during the last century. Grants are going to be provided to community-based projects, and we'll just talk about those in a minute. We currently have out to RFP through the Alaska Humanities Forum an online archive, a commemorative film, documentary, and a commemorative book, and those responses are due at the end of the month. We're looking to support the Anchorage Museum's legacy projects that are pending at the Anchorage Museum. We're going to provide supplemental support to Visit Anchorage for marketing support specific to the project so that we can get the most economic bang for our buck for the upcoming 2-year celebration. And the fifth use of the funds is the Humanities Forum. And as we discussed 2 months ago, the plan is to use the Humanities Forum that has a considerable amount of expertise in administering funds, issuing RFPs and the like to oversee this so that we know that we're getting the best bang for our buck and minimizing our overhead. The second page is a timeline. And as you can see, we're hot on it. The advisory committee is meeting on a monthly basis. We have the RFPs out. The project awards are coming up, as I said, at the end of the month. The online archive will be up and running for the 2 years of the Centennial. You can see when we hope that the book and documentary will be available next year. And then museum project oversight and community grants is more or less ongoing. Many of you have asked at the last meeting about our plans for fundraising, and we have active plans for fundraising. We're not just looking to the Municipal Assembly. I'm sure you'll be glad to hear that. We have a committee already up and running for corporate sponsorship. We're looking for corporations to invest in this community celebration. We're looking at foundations. You can imagine who those, the usual suspects. We're going to work on them and hopefully get them to support the project. As we indicated last time, we will probably come back and ask you for a little bit more, but we want to demonstrate to you, A, that we've spent this money wisely and show you exactly what we would do with the more before we would ask of it. And that is probably going to be time for your next budget cycle, so probably late September. And then our hope is that working with you and the mayor that we can put together a legislative package that will supplement the other three bundles. Our community outreach is extensive. I'd love to have you come to the meetings because it's been quite energizing to see how many people are interested. And I'll discuss with you here the list that you find at the end to talk about some of the people who have already indicated an interest. Susan particularly is meeting individually with organizations. She has considerable background in this with Ferrandi and other activities, and so knows how to work with these people to get them to identify what they want to do and have it support our centennial remembrance. And of course, we will have marketing and communications plan that we will develop in concert with Visit Anchorage. The balance of the packet are the list of the official events that we've already approved. If you can imagine, this is a considerable list. It shows you that our community is very actively interested in this. And we are continuing to meet with people on a monthly basis and trying to energize them in presenting different projects. The fact that you're on this list means you're an approved project. That doesn't mean you're going to get a dime of the funds or that you'll be licensed to use the logo. It means you'll be on the calendar and you'll have the good offices of Susan Duck to facilitate your project and try and make it sing and be part of the larger centennial event.
I have a couple of questions for you, Mrs. Johnston.
Yes, thank you, Jim, and thank you for all of this. I think as we get closer to budget season, and even I probably would have liked it in this, is basically a budget and funds that have been expended to date, because then we can have a way of sort of garnering where you are and where we are.
Sure.
And where the funds are available from, and that would help us as far as we could see where you're fundraising. And as I say, how much of this is the $500,000? And that would include any of the administrations. That's the one thing that I've noticed with all of our materials we've been kind of loose with is a budget. And so next time it would be really helpful.
Part of the reason I'm coming on a periodic basis is so we can give you that kind of information, but certainly before we would ask you for any more money, we'll show you how we've spent it, and hopefully you'll be convinced that we've done it successfully.
Right,
but
right. And I know it's as you're working on this and just in the development stage, sometimes the budget is not as accurate it will be in 6 months, but I think it would be really helpful.
Right. We'll know a lot more after these RFPs come back and we've had negotiations with the successful proposers.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Birch?
I just wanted to echo thanks for a job well done here and an update. I think I think it's a tremendous effort and well started here. One suggestion, I just in thumbing through this, I had a extended discussion last evening with a longtime friend about Anchorage homesteaders, and that's one thing I didn't see in here, but Anchorage would not be what it is today without private land ownership. Not only with the ANCSA conveyances that happened most recently, but also certainly the conveyances that happened with Mears. I know Get Mears is I think Kit Crittenden had written that.
Yes.
That's
with the cooperation of Cook Inlet Historical Society, whom I represent. represent it, yes.
It's awesome, and it should be mandatory reading for everybody in this community. But in any case, I think, just as a suggestion, some sort of focus on how homesteads evolved. I knew the Boniface family when at school, but I think this is just tremendous, and I think you've got enough lead time, hopefully, to get this kicked off right.
By all means, and hopefully people are listening at home and hear your suggestions and think of other ones, but the whole idea is, at this juncture, to encourage people to think of projects like homesteading. I mean, that's obviously pretty fundamental to every part of our community, and we need to have a good story be told about that.
Great. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Starr.
Yeah, I think Ms. Johnson was speaking sort of the budget. The tangibility of numbers is where I think as we get closer to the budget building cycle, it'll be easier if we kind of get a sense of that. And a couple of observations. There was the color run this last weekend where they splashed color over the runners. 17,000 runners apparently showed up for that and paid $45 a crack. There's $675,000 for running around our streets as a fundraiser opportunity. It seems like our community is willing to do anything for a T-shirt. So the message perhaps there is that also we may not want to send the message out that all the venues are free. There was several Alaska Celebration statements that were $100 dinners and that kind of stuff. So as you look to all of that, there seems to be the undertone that the city is going to provide everything. And so
no, that's not the plan.
Well, here's what I'm hearing. So, again, as you look to where that may be a revenue stream, perhaps factor that into the overall as to when that. And I appreciate the businesses in our town, but a lot of them that would love to. They've advertised we've been here 100 years and all of that. If they're using it as a profit center, then they have a responsibility, I think, to help really celebrate it. And so that's not just corporate outreach. It's could be something else too, where you charge them a fee.
By all means. I mean, the concept that we have with each one of these events, as Susan will discuss with the sponsors, is, okay, how are you going to pay for this yourself? I mean, we're the backup if it's really necessary, and they'll have to obviously justify any grant making through the advisory committee, and of course we'll have to convince the mayor in turn. And if we come back for any more money, obviously we're going to have to convince you that we've asked that question of each one of these sponsors, and that certainly is one of our objectives.
Thanks for the approach. Appreciate that.
Okay, good.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Nina and Susan, and especially you, Jim, for what you do and have been throughout the years behind the scenes and now in front of the camera. And I agree with Mr. Starr's comments and Ms. Johnson's comments in reference to a budget, okay? But you did say you're going to come back every quarter, and personally, I don't want you to come to the Assembly with some numbers that show you have $500,000 left and still ask us for money. I want to see you come before this Assembly and talk about what you've done with what you've already been given and probably have zero left and then ask us for more money so you can finish your project. That's my preference. And thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Steele.
Mr. Barnett, I'm glad you came tonight, and I'm glad to have your phone number on this request because as a partisan of Spenard, I do have some issues with Spenard. It has Spenard then and now, and I saw Mr. Whitekeys is in there, but I have some ideas, and I'll give you a call at some point and
wonderful.
Chat a little bit about. I think Spenard could be a real asset to the celebration, and if it wasn't, something would be missing from telling our history. So
wonderful. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett.
Okay. Thank you all.
Our next item before us is item 14A. It is the municipality ordinance number 76, an ordinance of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, providing for authorizing and approving a short-term borrowing program for the municipality in one or more series in aggregate principal in the amount not to exceed $60,000 or $60 million for the purpose of providing funds to refinance certain outstanding debt and to provide for additional funds for future capital improvements for the Port of Anchorage. This item is before us for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You should each have in front of you a floor amendment. It makes several changes, but basically does one thing, which is to reduce the short-term borrowing program authorization to $40 million rather than $60 million. That reflects the current outstanding debt and allows the administration to
Second.
Sorry, to come back to us if they need more. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we've got a floor amendment and a second. Any discussion on the floor amendment? Mr. Steele?
I know there was some discussion about via emails about what was whether the $60 million was committed or whether it's just the $40 million, whether they would have to come back to the Assembly to authorize expenditure of anything above what's already been expended. I guess I'd like to ask the administration on that particular issue. Okay, or Mr. Flynn, for that matter.
Well, you can ask anybody you want, but there's an email here from Ms. Mahoney that responds to that question.
Okay. Ms. Johnston?
I was just going to answer that currently in commercial paper outstanding, it's the $40 million, and that's what, once we authorize this, our finance department will work with our bonders, and we will be going for the $40 million. The additional $20 million was for 3 years down the road, if needed, and but we don't currently have any more than $40 million, and that's all our revenues can pay for.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote on the amendment. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously. We now have the AO before us as amended. Mr. Starr?
I have kind of like quibs and puns, although it's a serious topic. My reluctance is that I really don't want the ship to leave port yet until we know what we're going to build. So is that going to happen, Mr. Vacalis, in terms of a timeline? I know we had the discussion about money being required in 3 years and that. Are we getting closer to say, hey, this is where we're headed, the general manager concept now, and then we've got some restrictions on spending where you kind of have a requirement on to keep us more informed? Are we getting closer with an end game solution?
Yes, sir, we are. In fact, I think the last time that I presented to Assembly members, we were envisioning having a pretty good way forward, by around the first part of July. The only thing I'd say about this particular document that's before you is that, and I know you, and I don't want to regurgitate what you've already read from Ms. Mahoney, but bottom line is they actually were authorized $75 million, and we restricted that to $60 million ourselves internally. And all this really does is just keep in place the same agreement that we have right now with the commercial paper for something that gets us a better rate. And so all we're asking is that certainly we're obligated for the $40 million because that's been spent. It's the additional $20 million, I think, that's in question. And that additional $20 million is just so that we have the amount of money available. Because even, I think, as we discuss this under the best scenarios, and if everything comes in line, and if the state does come forward with the remaining $250 million ask that we have, there still will be some type of a shortfall over and above what we already have on hand today, and then that $250 million. There'll be some type of a shortfall. The question is the order of magnitude as to how much that will be. And it could be a small amount or it could be a larger amount. And again, that really won't be determined until we see what the final design solution is and what that cost is.
And you answer the question that you'll have some of that data by July, but that last statement that you just put out there, that won't be in finality in July, will it?
No, because remember the next step, which we do have the money in hand to do, is a project management team. And that project management team will be assigned several things to make determinations for us and recommendations. And one of those, of course, will be to see where we get the best value in the solution that we select. So whatever that solution going forward is that we select, then we would ask the project management team to give us a recommendation on the best value to make that happen.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not trying to debate you, but that also bears mention for me to be a little bit more cautious now and then revisit it, because $20 million, it could be 40. But Mr. Vakelis also, I guess through the chair, when I asked the question about our ability to pay it back and where does the money come from, it was specified that it was the port users that generated the money. Is that still an accurate statement? We pay back the $40 million note by port user fees?
The payback basically is revenues produced by the port. So it would be port users, but that's all types of port users. Not only those that are here, but those that actually come here and do business with us. Obviously, we have a group that's down there already that have leaseholds, and as you know, their revenues are based on leaseholds. It's based on dockage fees. It's based on goods coming across the dock. It's based on volume of petroleum coming through the pipeline to the tank. So all of those things combined produce the revenue that this basically would be paid from.
And the reason I asked it in that context was part of my thinking was that if I was a tenant down there and predicated on having to pay back, I would be a little bit more reticent to feel comfortable with $60 million of debt owed that my ships had to pay for than $40 million. Do the renters get nervous, like the Totes and the Horizons, about that debt load?
Well, I think you and I and everybody else would, sure.
Yeah.
But as you also know, there is a process that we go through, and most of these leases are long-term leases that they have. In fact, I think they're 5-year, plus they do have options mutually agreeable to an additional 5. So that's as far as the leases of the land. Dorket, the actual other fees basically are tariffed. And the tariff is a twofold operation. We hire a contractor that actually comes in and looks at our comparison of our services compared to other ports, and then also looks at revenues current and projected, as well as expenses. And based on that, makes a recommendation to the commission, which the commission has to vet. And then it comes to you for final determination. So those are the actual two pieces that makes up the revenues. That's how they're calculated.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, partly because of my observations. What I've seen now, the port, and I don't know if they're calling it the Port of Wasilla yet or not, but there's about 40 acres of paved laydown yards over there, fully lighted, fully secured, and the railroad connection heading that way. So what I see is a reduction in that rate comparison to where I'll bet you they offer competitive rates. And I just caution that the bodies start to be cognizant of what else is out there. And I think there'll be a day when we compete with that port in some capacity or another. And I'm just a note of caution tonight. That's all. Thank you very much.
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, Mr. Risval, could I just for the bodies information, it was my understanding that when you were modeling this and you increased, you had the outlying figure of $60 million. That was the third year of your modeling, and the current, this goes 2 years with an additional year.
Yes, Mr. Hall, I'm Ross Risvold, manager of the Public Finance and Investments Division.
Ms. Johnston, the port has the ability to support $44 million in debt at this time with their net revenues. And we use that as a model, and we use that as a debt capacity to back into how much they could afford. Net revenues is gross revenues minus expenses plus depreciation, basically. A couple of years from now, with their anticipated revenues, they could perhaps afford $51 million in debt. A couple of years hence, they could afford perhaps $60 million in debt. That is where we got the $60 million number for this ordinance.
And if by the third year the municipality was interested in increasing it to $60 million, we could still be working with this bank, and by the third year, by the Assembly's approval, increase it to another $20 million. Am I correct?
That's correct.
So there's still the option out there, if there was a need to go the extra $20 million, we could do it in 3 years. I just wanted to clear that up. But this is fine at this point to have the $40 million that covers what our commercial paper, that will cover our current commercial paper load. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Johnston. We could increase the limit of the loan agreement in the future based on mutual agreement between the bank and the municipality, but the $40 million would be fine for today. It would replace the commercial paper program, and that's what we expect to do. We would close the commercial paper program, and then we would operate a short-term short-term borrowing program with a commercial bank under this program.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, by the way. I appreciate the time you put into this and the creativity. I think we're very fortunate to have you in the Finance Department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Steele?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. You may have answered my question too. My concern was that if we're looking at getting a good interest rate for an upper limit of $60 million and setting that up, I'm sure that the financial institution would be concerned that we didn't have the volume at this date to take out the $60 million, but you said that it would be renegotiable at that time, and so I'm sure the interest rate would then look at the revenue stream to see the security of their funds in terms of revenue stream. So, is that an appropriate analysis, or if we're asking for 60, we only can support 44 million now? Would the bank adjust the interest rate now, a higher interest rate now, because we're looking at something that's above our revenue stream, or would they negotiate based upon the 40 million at this point, and we would have to renegotiate the rate at a later date?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Steele. The $60 million really only shows up in the ordinance, and the bank is aware of the ordinance. They're also aware of the cash flow that we discussed here a moment ago. 44 today, they could probably afford 51, 60 in 4 or 5 years. We have applied for the bank, and they are underwriting $40 million. Okay, and that is the intent of the ordinance, and that is it. $40 million today. Now, whether they committed to $40 million or $60 million, it probably wouldn't make any difference in the interest rate, because it's a short-term interest rate, and the dollar amount really wouldn't make any difference there. But the difference would be our capacity, and our capacity is based on the revenues, and we've showed them we could support $44 million. And that $44 million is long-term debt. We've made the assumption that we converted it to long-term debt at a much higher rate. So this rate is dramatically lower because it's short-term rate, so we could afford a lot more. But we have to make the assumption that this is going to be turned into long-term debt, and that's our real capacity. But there wouldn't be any change in interest rate if we had gone to the bank for $44 million or 60 or just 40. We went for 40. We've been approved for 40, and we hope to close this transaction actually on Monday, assuming we pass tonight. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That clarifies my point. It seems to me that the only item before us is do we approve what we've got, what we need now? And the only difference is what happens in the interim in terms of the assembly makeup or the port, that would make us think, no, we don't want to throw another $20 million into it or something like that. It's a security on the part of the administration. I suspect that they would at least have that commitment, and or at least could argue that they had that commitment. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I would vote for the 60.
Mr. Starr?
We already voted on that, but I thank you for the presentation. It was very well done in terms of the explanations on what you're doing. If we don't approve this, we let the commercial paper program expire. We would in essence then take money out of our municipal cash pool and pay the $44 million that's on the books. Is that our only source of revenue if we don't approve this?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir, that would not be the case, Mr. Starr. The port is obligated to pay their debt only from their revenues. They could not use funds from municipal cash pool, the general cash pool, or any other department of the municipality.
So that said, and I saw your qualifiers with operating expenses being the first thing they're required to pay and all the way on down through that. If we don't approve this refinancing package using the full faith and credit of the municipality, how could the $44 million be paid back? What's your cash balance in the port account now?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, the commercial paper program has a liquidity facility that stands behind it. And it's a liquidity facility with a commercial bank. It's a U.S. bank. That liquidity facility pays for every maturity of commercial paper that happens, and then we, in turn, roll the commercial paper with another issuance and pay the bank back. So the bank is whole, we pay interest along the way. That letter of credit facility was entered into in December of 2010, and it was established for a 3-year term with U.S. Bank. That facility matures in December of 2013, in just 6-7 months, whatever. And so we have taken it upon ourselves to start a little early. Sometimes we usually don't start till 3-4 months out. But we said, let's take a look at this. We had a $75 million letter of credit with the bank, and we said, we're not using that, so let's reduce that. So we were able to reduce that to $40,500,000.
Let me just focus the question. If we don't roll it another time into an additional funding source, could we pay off the $44 million just okay, outstanding on our credit card or our line of credit?
What we would do then is we would probably issue long-term revenue bonds, and we would refinance the commercial paper with those.
Long-term revenue bonds as approved by the voters, or just municipal bonds in capacity we already have?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, we would issue long-term revenue bonds of the Port of Anchorage, supported solely by the revenues of the Port of Anchorage, probably for 30-year bonds, and therefore our debt service they would be able to meet the debt service on that.
And I'm asking that because ultimately, as the project finalizes or whatever, we'll probably do some form of that anyhow. Is that correct?
That would be one of our options for the plan of finance for whatever plan is determined for the remainder of the project.
Is it not good finances to package one of those $44 million long-term municipal bond packages now and just put it on the books as payback requirements year to year? Meaning, why not stretch it over 30 years under a municipal bond, long-term, low interest rate, predictable market, all of that stuff that's in alignment right now? Why not do it now with $44 million?
Mr. Chair and Mr. Starr, you're suggesting that we do that right now, to pay off, issue 30-year bonds and pay off the commercial paper.
That's right.
Okay, we could do that, yes, sir.
And your cash flow then would increase at the port. You'd have essentially more operating capital because your interest payments every year required would go down, likely because you're refinancing over long periods of time.
No, sir, they would go up.
Because of the interest required at the 30-year note? Is that-
Because we're paying all in 1.2% for this borrowing of $40 million.
Sure.
Okay. So if we do a long-term revenue bond transaction for 30 years, that will increase the debt service for the Port of Anchorage immediately.
I agree with that, but
Yes.
your payment's spread over 30 years as opposed to 3.
Right, but
So,
but I'd have to start paying off, I'd have to start amortizing principal, and I'd have to start paying a cost of funds of probably 4% versus a 1.2% today. So,
well, I guess, I mean, are we kicking the can down the road a little bit until we get a more point of certainty? Is that essentially another way you could package the action tonight, is just roll it over? And you know, I've been on the body now. We've rolled it twice. I was on it in 2008, and I've seen it refinanced in discussion in 2010, you know, with almost some of the same qualifying statements as that. So is there going to be an end game in sight where we ultimately package that all and we do it with fiscal prudency?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, you are correct. We're rolling this program. We started it in 2008. Approximately 2.5 years later, we rolled it again in December of 2010, and we are asking to do that again. It was a great program to have in 2008, and as you know, the market rates went even down further, so we were paying very little for this program. And when we rolled it in 2010, we had the feeling, and the marketplace had the feeling, that interest rates were going to stay low. They not only stayed low, they went down. So then it was a good decision as well, in hindsight. Now the marketplace still feels that interest rates are going to be low for quite some time. So this is probably another good move for us to take. There's no guarantees that rates are going to stay down, go up or go down, or stay the same. But we believe that this will be a good program for the port. We could kick this can down the road for 30 years, as long as at some point in time you start paying off principal. You don't have to you don't have to just pay interest. We could start paying principal.
Yeah, let me ask you this. With the $40 million note, I asked the question, I didn't get it, maybe I didn't ask it correctly. We fully expensed $40 million. What's our balance due? Are we keeping up, or are we actually accruing a debt service cost on the $40 million? Do we owe $44 million now, or $43 million? What do we actually owe?
You actually owe $40 million plus interest. And the interest we pay every time a note matures. So we're current on our interest every time a note matures. A note matures every 4
so
or
it's
5
interest
months.
only, but no payments, but you haven't let the interest grow past the 40 million.
Correct. Principal outstanding is 40. We always pay interest at the maturity of a note.
Good. And you're skilled at what you do. It's not a challenge statement. It's kind of to preface this discussion. So the next time we have it, we're ready to go. I asked the same questions in 2008 and 2010, and I think it's the right thing to do, except with the qualification of what we just amended, which is bring it back down until we get the master plan and the master budget and the financial discussion. I think it's easier, and the public would probably appreciate us for doing it as well, just to kind of keep it all held down. So, Mr. Chairman, I just had one more question. Thank you. Mr. Vacalis, I don't want to sound flippant, but what did we actually spend the $40 million on? Do we know? Was there one thing? Because I've seen monies come from Homeland Security for that, and I noticed the port director's not here either for the engagement in the conversation, but we got money for the gate upgrades and the security upgrades. We got a lot of Homeland Security grants that passed through the system. And then the other big issue was the pylon repair, not the sheet pile, but the pylon repairs and all of that. Those were funded through, I believe, some state grant monies. Was there other big items that we paid for out of the $40 million? I was somewhat startled to recognize it was already at $40 million. What did we actually spend it on?
The $40 million went with some of the state grants that we received at the same time, and that all went to MARAD. So, yes, was the money spent on port activities and construction? Yes. Unless, what we would have to do is we'd have to pull all the records to see what went to what. But as you know, it was mixed. The sources was mixed and then paid through the MARAD and their contracting officials. So I couldn't tell you right now what all of it was spent on, but I can tell you it was spent on the construction to some degree. Those other funds that you're talking about, as far as the Homeland Security funds and things, separate, never went to MARAD. Those were internal. It had nothing to do with the construction itself.
Yeah, I guess, we're focused all on just the port expansion project, and that's what this specifies. I just asked the question generically because some of the expenses that we had on the port weren't necessarily related to that, the road improvements, the security upgrades as well. So do we owe people any money?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a fair question. So as you remember, there was litigation that was entered into by MARAD. When I say litigation, they solved a claim that was presented to them from ICRC on behalf of its subs. We contested, those charges. MARAD went ahead and settled all of those charges at that point in time, of which we were never made privy to exactly what the agreements were until recently. There is some question as to whether they covered all of the claims or not. That is still being looked at by our legal department. We felt, because we weren't privy to what the agreements were, that all settlements at that time or claims against the project was resolved. We understand that that may or may not be the case. The true dollar amount, I could not tell you, sir.
And I know we've already passed the reduction down to the $40 million for that, but I was wondering if the administration needed to posture some money for that. And one other question, and I'm not trying to belabor this because it is nice how we want to go ride the Ferris wheel, but one of the compliments that you received at dinner in passing, I'll pass on to you, was that Mr. Vacalis has spooled up pretty good in emergency preparedness. If there was a problem at the port, in earthquake or sheet pile let loose or some dock problem issue, what would be the ability for us, how would we pay that in an emergency scenario that perhaps the state wasn't there to rescue us or didn't qualify federally? Is it just the cash pool of the municipality that kicks into the port contribution, or do we?
If it was a true emergency, you would probably be eligible for federal funds.
Quickly?
And state and federal funds. We may have to upfront, those original repairs or whatever it is to be reimbursed by either the state and or the feds. But if we had to do something like that, I'd go to Lucinda and to Ross and say, okay, what's the best way of, taking care of this? If it was over and above what the capital reserves that the port had.
And this is really the last one. We've talked about the $75 million capacity, and you only borrowed up to $40 million capacity. I know Mr. Flynn and I had some consternation about that discussion. Are you still in your calculations? Are you authorized to borrow up to $75 million?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, as I mentioned earlier, we were authorized originally with the bank for a letter of credit of $75 million. In March of this year, we reduced it to $40.5 million, so we cannot go above that with the bank.
I thought I heard somebody answer that. Great. That's the answer I needed. Thank you very much. I'm done.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Starr, for asking all the questions, because I think my two questions were answered. As a matter of fact, they probably were, but just to hear you state them again. The first one was what's the interest rate? And I thought I heard you say 1.2%.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Gray Jackson, we're paying on the commercial paper 0.2%.
0.2.
Okay, but we're also paying on the liquidity facility for the bank to stand by the commercial paper program of approximately 1% with all the fees in. So that's where I came up with about 1.2%.
Okay, well, thank you.
So our cost on that $40 million is 1.2%.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification and the breakdown. And then I heard you say that this is interest only right now, and that matures every 4 to 5 months, and then you pay the interest?
Ms. Gray
Is that
Jackson,
correct?
would you mind saying that again?
Okay. Is this interest-only loan, short-term loan, for now? I heard you say, make a statement that it matures every 4 to 5 months. So can you, be a little bit more clear on that statement?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
A commercial paper program is a short-term borrowing program, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Gray Jackson. It's a short-term borrowing program that is commonly used during the construction phase of a major project like this. Commercial paper are notes in the short-term market that mature from 1 to 9 months. They can not go past 270 days, which is 9 months. So we have a commercial paper dealer, and they have customers that are investors, and they invest in our commercial paper. So if the investor wants to invest for 4, 5, or 6 months, they sort of tell the trader, and the trader says, I can go out for 4 or 5 months for you. And we say, fine. So in 4 or 5 months, that commercial paper matures, and we pay the interest, the port does, they pay the interest, and we roll the $40 million into a new note. And we can do that for years, and we have been doing it since 2008. And some of the commercial paper originally was 7 or 8 months. There were times when it was during the financial crisis, in the wake of it, it was a week or a day. But we always rolled, and then now we have recently been rolling it for 4 or 5 months. But all in, on an annual interest basis, it's about 1.25%. So that's about $500,000 a year on $40 million.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. There's no one in the queue, so please vote on the motion as amended. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
We're missing some. We got them. Motion carries unanimously. We now have before us item 14B, AR number 138, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $317,019 as a grant from the State of Alaska Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to the Public Works Department, State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grants Funds 231 for reimbursement of an eligible disaster cost associated with the severe storms of September 2012. Item is before the body for public testimony. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, this item is before the body for action.
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Honeman?
Yeah, I just note, and I don't want to, it's the last item on the agenda, I think, but, this is one of those things where the governor had declared a disaster in the south central region up to the valley, the water and the wind, and of course we'd be glad to take the funding. I just don't think we did enough as a community to concern ourselves with our utility costs that, the ratepayers now have to pay, and the declaration was there, so we might have been eligible for a little bit more money. I'm not positive of that, so I just support the approval of this. Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the queue, please vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
That item passes unanimously. We have no special orders, no unfinished agenda. We are at audience participation. Anyone to testify? Anyone at all? Good evening.
Yes, good evening. My name is Bill Seitz, spelled S-E-I-T-Z. Years ago, I used to come to assembly meetings quite a while, but before this year, the last one I attended, I believe Mr. Flynn was in the audience, and that's a while back, and his mom was on the assembly, and she introduced him, and she was proud of him, and he was maybe a little embarrassed. Heather said he was here attending for extra credit in one of his high school classes. Now, all of you ran for the assembly for different reasons, issues, causes, concern, projects, etc. Mr. Trombley, Mr. Flynn, and Amy, they're our future. And my thought is, where will our future come from? And something I'd like you to consider would be what I term, we have like public-private partnerships. I would like to propose you consider a partnership with the school district and the assembly for the kids in high school, the students in high school in their junior and senior years and I don't know the curriculum requirements, but I believe that we need to look at students to get their interest in the government, because you have all these other, well, businesses, engineering, military, trades. Everybody's out there kind of recruiting the brightest and smartest and best ones, and I think that we need to kind of look at that. And I think that if we were to get students interested in assembly and government, it would help us all in the long run. I know since the time I was at the meeting with Mr. Flynn in the audience that the technology has improved, and you know, we have on the TV, and we have all kinds of technology that's advanced, and I would like to see that the students interested in it either attend the meetings or monitor on the TV, and then the assembly or the administration or department members either write or call or attend their classes to discuss the issues of working the functions with them. And many people generally lump government together like federal, state, and local can be accessed and interacted with the easiest, and I feel that we need to start with our youth to get them involved, and I'm hoping that the program will plant the seeds of public service in our youth so that the brightest and best will someday consider serving on assembly or other bodies. And my ideas are not cast in concrete, and if others have better ideas or suggestions, go for it, but I believe some sort of a school-local government partnership has potential for long-term benefits for all of us. I don't know if the Anchorage School District still does something like what Mr. Flynn participated in. I don't know the logistics of a program for youth interested in government to learn more at a local level or the government participation, but I think it is a doable project. The video port, I made the tour a few years ago, and I'm kind of busy now, but I'd suggest that they video one of them tours and video the tours of the Sullivan Generation Plan out on Muldoon and the Asplin Point Warrensoff port, the sewer plant out there, and others that are available, and use them as educational and information for students and for the public both. And where I kind of got going on this was a couple meetings ago, Mr. Starr was lamenting about how do we let the people know, how do we tell them what we have to deal with, how do we show them what we need to go through to make legislations and stuff. And I thought, yeah, you could post them out there at the lobby and you could put them on your site and everything, but I think for a long-term situation, maybe starting with students and trying to educate them a little bit might be something to explore. And so I thank you for your time listening.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions. Mr. Horniman?
Mr. Sykes, thank you for coming forth. Just briefly, I don't know if you, during the school year anyway, I know that government classes from around the city, different high schools, several of their students, their teachers do give them still credit. So like Mr. Flynn, there are several students that come in. I know when I sign their papers as they come through, because they have to prove that they were here, I challenge them to stay as long as they can. Perhaps if the meeting goes past a certain hour, they've got drives to make and things like that. But it's always interesting to me to different ways to try to connect, and so we can educate and inform. And it goes both ways, really. I can learn a lot, particularly of the youth. It reminds me that not too long ago we had an actual youth commission that was a board that was, that we've done away with now, and youth were invited to participate in their local government. So I'd like to see if we can explore something where people are more interested and involved, particularly for long term, because it is what needed. So thank you for your ideas. There's a lot of them that we could probably work with, and I'm in the schools from time to time, but I'd love to get in there more. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Could I reply to Mr. Honeman, please? Sure. Excuse me, through the chair to Mr. Honeman, I thank you for all that. One thing I remember in school was when people that weren't the students or the parents came and spoke to the classes. That's one thing that really influenced me in my personal life, and so I'd encourage all of you to do that at different times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Seitz, good to see you. Just to answer your question about what's the future's future, well, Adam and Amy and I all have kids, so we're doing our part.
Mr. Starr?
Yeah, thank you for your observations. In fact, your public speaking statement at the end is something that I do engage in, and to say that a fair number of the students that show up from here are from Chugiak Eagle River, because I try to make it a point. The challenge that I have with their their requirement to attend is that it's only predicated around an elective class. Not every student is necessarily required to engage in a civics level class beyond what they have in the curriculum of Alaska Studies, it's called. And so there is an Alaska Studies class, which I've never mentored to see what it actually talks about in it, but I'm sure it's a historical perspective of how Alaska developed. But the student government class is truly optional. I address it, and I think the teachers encourage them to come here, as they do community council meetings in our areas. But it's such a small percentage, very small number, that not to come here necessarily, but of the kids in high school that actually go to student government class. That's unfortunate. Thank you.
Excuse me, through the chair to Mr. Sawyer, yes, I realize that, and as I was taught, basically, the bell curve, the 10% are the ones that are going to be carrying us forward. The other 10% are the ones that are down, and the 80% in the middle are doing their thing. But what I was hoping was maybe that we could put some videos together of what the functions are of the different departments. That's why I mentioned the port tour, and then have it, and then talk to the school district and see if they could, present that for 1 week in their government classes, just to explain how the local government functions. So when the students graduate from high school, they'll be a little knowledgeable and vote, and maybe interested instead of taking 5 or 10 years of the learning curve to where something affects them in their neighborhood to where they come and then, interact. That's what I was hoping.
That's a good observation. Thank you.
Ms. Dembowski.
Mr. Seitz, what you were saying speaks right to my heart. Self-governance and democracy is exciting. And the one thing I learned just being new, and one of the groups that really latched on to my campaign was the younger generation, because I would talk to them and they would engage. So I think as elected officials, one of the things, I don't think it's good enough anymore for us just to sit and sign off their papers and engage them here. Yeah. I think we have an obligation to go to the schools or go to these events where these kids are and engage them and explain to them how this really can affect them. Yeah. Because I know of at least 7 or 8 18-year-olds that were just graduating that made a point to go and vote, and they Facebooked me afterwards and told me they did. So it's exciting, and as elected officials, when we can spur that new generation to be motivated, to be involved, I think some of the ideas you bring forward are really great ones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan.
Anyone else? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Michael Todd, and I've never spoke here previously, but I've witnessed a few of my friends doing so. One of the issues that I'm familiar with, having witnessed presentations and a lot of literature and information about fluoridation of the water supply in the municipality of Anchorage, it's a concern that I find it amazing that more people aren't voicing as an issue. But with that said, there's some real basic concepts that I'm sure have been argued here previously and presented. You can present medical documentation that in my view is bought and paid for by the corporate interests that promote this fluoridation. And you can present medical documentation from folks that have obviously got no financial interest or gain. They just want to present the facts. And it's pretty tough to refute the difference between those two qualified sources of information. With that said, I'm not qualified to speak medically, short of what I've learned. And I've done enough research to feel pretty comfortable that I've learned there's some real problems with the cumulative nature of fluoride in the human body and what it's capable of doing in the human body with no regulation. There's no way to state someone's getting an amount that's okay or acceptable. And one of the examples that I can come up with that's real easy is that here in the Anchorage area, we had Fort Rich, now J-Bear. Apparently there was a level of fluoridation in the water supply that was somewhere around 3 times the required or regulated amount. And that's when I learned about the cumulative nature of fluoride, I really started to question that, in that 3 times. Okay, well, what if I drink 5 times the amount of water that is estimated someone's going to drink? It's a cumulative, again, builds up, doesn't just go away. Then I take a couple showers that day. It goes through your skin, builds up in your system as a result of your exposure. So you've taken a shower in the morning, had a busy day, take another shower that night. So now I'm getting exposed twice to the water that is obviously being fluoridated, and it's absorbing in my system, accumulating, along with what I've already drank, more than, say, maybe somebody would be estimated to drink. Then I brush my teeth, and I get maybe a little more than that pea-size amount of fluoridated toothpaste in my system. I don't use it, but let's just say hypothetically I did. And I use some mouthwash that's fluoridated, and you have these various factors. What is safe at that point? Because it's accumulative. With that said, there's examples of amounts of fluoride being added to water in many communities, one of them being Hooper Bay. People were killed as a result. I just don't think it's safe, and I think there's a lot of examples as to why other people should be looking at that and realizing that it's not safe, and we're paying for it. And a lot of young children are being exposed to it ignorantly. Their parents are adding it to their formula and feeding their children they don't even know. So I just think people should be made aware of it. I think you people have been made aware of it. And, it'd be great to see something happen.
Thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
Hello, my name is Daryl Lanzon. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Congratulations, Mr. Steele, Ms. Dombowski. Welcome. I'm going to ask a question through the chair. Mr. Steele, you'd be excused because you haven't been privy to this information. Who has watched Fluoride Gate? Nobody has watched Fluoride Gate. Okay, I'm a concerned citizen. I have sent all of you that information except for Mr. Steele. It's an hour-long video, and you don't care enough to watch an hour-long video that is based on a Harvard study that was released in July of 2012 that says that water fluoridation lowers IQ in children. I care about children. I thought that our elected officials cared about children. I have presented evidence time and time again. I have sent it to you in emails, and you just confirmed to me that you have not watched it. I asked a simple question. Nobody raised their hands. No one acknowledged it. I said it's an hour long. Mr. Steele, I'll send it to you. I hope you take the time to watch it. I hope you care about your kids and the kids in this community enough. There are 240,000 people on AWU's water being poisoned on a daily basis. You will hear from the ADA and the CDC that fluoride is a naturally occurring compound. Guess what? Calcium fluoride is a naturally occurring compound in water. Guess what else? That's not what they're putting in our water supply. They're putting in a hazardous industrial waste that comes mostly from the fertilizer industry. It also comes from the ammunitions. It's also nuclear Kool-Aid. It comes from that as well. It is not a naturally occurring mineral. I've told you this before. You guys just stand there. We had the Public Safety Committee meeting on fluoride that, mind you, was not announced to the public. And it was back in November. It has been, 6-8 months now? And I've been told by Mr. Honeman that we're waiting for the research and this to come back. As far as I'm concerned, it's just kind of like a kick in the balls. Excuse me, but it's like just brushing me off, blowing it off. It doesn't matter. We're going to say it again. We're doing the research. We're waiting on it. What research? I have presented it to you. I have shown you on the EPA's website that the EPA itself says that fluoride is a known neurotoxicant. It is on the same list as aluminum, lead, arsenic, things that you are very familiar with. Fluoride's right on that list. It is in the same emails that I sent you before. You can look it up for yourself. It is not some crackpot thing that you can find on the internet. It is .gov. The National Institute of Health is where that Harvard study is posted. .gov. I didn't find it on InfoWars or some crazy tinfoil hat wearing website. I've done my research. You guys know I know what I'm talking about, and it's time. Like, I really thought, I gave some time. I didn't come in here because I was frustrated and fed up with the things, and nobody stepped up. guess what? It's time to get legal action. It's time for me to try to see if I can convince the ACLU to do something. And also, if I might take a little more, maybe you can have me escorted out. It was really interesting to me, Mr. Hall, that the gentleman, and no offense to him, was allowed to speak for over a minute longer. And this time,
As I recall, I haven't shut you off yet.
You haven't, but I'm going to bring up to the point when I was speaking onto a resolution that you were a sponsor of. I would think that if I were speaking in favor of your resolution, you might have given me 30 seconds longer to finish it up rather than having me escorted out by the police, like you did. I was speaking to your resolution. You were the sponsor of it, and you had me escorted out rather than giving me 30 seconds longer. Mind you, I was one of 3 people that spoke in favor of it when you had all those union shills all over the place? Think about that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone at all? Seeing, hearing none, the chair will, unless there's an assembly member comment, take a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Meeting is adjourned.